welcome to the session. My name is Ryan McDonald. I'm part of the Oracle IT team, and I'll be part of the moderating side of this today. This webinar is part of the Oracle at Oracle series, and you have the opportunity to kind of hear from our executive team and the team that's really re-imaging what Oracle is. In this series, we're going to see kind of our insights into our journey into the cloud and how we moved our own solutions and empowered ourselves to kind of get to that exceptional customer and employee experience by moving ourselves to OCI. And then we're going to share what we learned, and then hopefully we can have others on the line here also learn from our journey as we kind of go in. So let's dive into today's topic. Next over 45 minutes or so, like I said, you hear about how we moved into our OCI infrastructure. And I'm going to hand it over to our hosts, Paul and Christine, to introduce themselves. Paul, over to you.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate the introduction. I am so excited to be here today with you and to really represent Oracle and OCI and talk about all the great things that we've done here. So my name is Paul Higginbotham. I am the Senior Vice President in OCI, and I run enterprise applications, which you can think of large enterprise platforms, services, and applications that we have across the organization. Big focus on internal Oracle while also supporting external as well. And we're going to walk through a lot of that today. But I'm going to hand it off to Christine. But just to close it up, super excited to be here. Can't wait to get into this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul. Hello and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Christine Saros, and I'm the Vice President of Cloud IT Engineering here in OCI. I've been with Oracle for 11 years, and over the last 18 months, my role has been to lead the migrations of our enterprise and development services onto OCI, IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS platforms. This has included the exit of some of our most critical workloads out of our Oracle on-prem data centers onto our cloud environments. In order to accomplish these moves, while continuing to operate key production services, my team has also developed a scalable suite of management tooling, which enable us to orchestrate automated workloads in this hybrid environment we're now working in. So during our presentation today, Paul and I are really pleased, as Paul mentioned, to share our migration experience of running Oracle on Oracle. So if we can jump to the next slide, please. So as we get started, I'd like to set some context for the audience regarding scope and scale of our activities. The story really begins with 23 on-prem data centers across 7 countries, several decades of acquisitions, and 603 production enterprise applications. And again, as Paul mentioned, enterprise applications in this sense are business critical applications currently used by lines of businesses across the company. And they could be external customer facing, or they just could be internal facing applications that we're using to run our daily business. These environments have been hosted traditionally by IT in our corporate data centers, and they would include examples of things such as real estate and facilities, marketing, sales, tax and audit, as well as a number of key productivity applications such as things like email and collaboration services. Further complexity in our program has also included things like our retention hold systems and our full suite of security appliances and the tooling that goes along with just managing in an enterprise data center environment. We didn't, however, end our migration scope with just our applications. We actually further extended to include our product development, developer, and test environments. And these are the environments that our Oracle product development teams across the corporation use for things like coding, for large-scale test farms, and also to really collaborate as a collective across the corporation. So after we refined this program scope, which is obviously very large, we kicked off our disposition planning. And you will see our classifications here on this slide listed as the 5 R's, is what we refer to them as. So as we initiated our program and defined those key objectives, and we really jumped into what kind of time and resources are the important considerations. This meant that as we reviewed all of our scope, we realized there is not a one solution fits all. So in the case of the 5 R's, in the case of rehost, we have some applications that are on a path to SaaS. So that SaaS solution may be internal, it may be external, but these are applications that are frozen in time at this point and are being worked on for their next generation solution. So they can shift, but they can't really change per se. And they may utilize things like bare metal versus a standard IaaS control plane, as an example. In the case of replatform, where we can't modify the whole stack, there are still a number of really large interim gains that we could make, where we're able to re-architect this stack and improve some of it by shifting to current OCI IS images and newer mid-tier software, such as things like WebLogic. This is still a leap towards prepping for native services, but it's not a full refactor. So then when you jump into the refactor concept, this is really where we work in partnership with the application development teams and the product teams, and we were able to re-architect the entire stack to take full advantage of IaaS and PaaS services, as well as managed PaaS and things like autonomous database as an example. The additional win was then our ability to be really to sync into spinning up infrastructure and our environments as code. We can now take advantage of things like the OCI console, as well as APIs to tie into our other pipelines to do things like provisioning and your standard change tasks. In the case of Retire, we eliminated 200 applications which had limited user bases, and really over time had use cases that had diminished as business models had changed. So really at the end, over 1,000 racks, we have about 150 that are required for us to retain due to very hardware specific engineering and high touch lab type environments that require proximity to our developers. So in summary, we've really been able to consolidate our fleet down to 6 data centers with plans to achieve an end state of us just remaining in 2 small labs regionally. And all of our other data center workloads will now reside in OCI. Next slide, please. So as I introduced our program, I spoke to our program objectives focusing on our resource savings, which again were the time, money, and people. It turns out that we have experienced many benefits, however, that are much larger and above and beyond just those areas. Of course, managing service costs is also always a fundamental business principle. In the legacy on-prem days, you would have purchased a big iron server, you would have virtualized it to share, and you could spin it up and down with the right software. But you paid a set depreciation for years the moment that that environment hit the floor. And you couldn't really, change that. That part of the equation was that you were going to pay for that, whether that system was highly utilized or not. With Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, you pay for what you use. You can scale up and down based on your business needs, which may be daily peak cycles or it could be general use trends from your employees. In our case, we found that this trend actually in the shift to cloud directly vastly improved our systems and enabled us to shrink our hardware footprint by upwards of 80%. Less hardware also means less hardware failures. So just huge wins all around for us in this area. The other great benefit is with cloud, you have that agility to spin up an entire enterprise grade environment, or you can just spin up a few VMs. You can do this through the console, you can tie it into your pipelines, as I've mentioned as well. Within my org, to further promote security, we actually provision all of our virtual cloud networks, our security lists, our load balancing. It's all part of the platform directly, and it can be very highly customized. So these services are really integrated, and they have significantly reduced the time that we spend with our Oracle security teams reviewing architectural reference diagrams. So now we really take the time as we've had these defined standards and as they've been directly integrated into the platform and into our model to really review only the deltas to those standards versus going back with a full review each and every time we deploy something new. Availability to the business criticality, tied to business criticality is always key. So based on our needs, we can deploy to a single fault domain, we can deploy to multiple domains, we can deploy across regions. Automation within the platform does that work for us now. So we can avoid large and complex infrastructure outages by simply choosing out the gate as we provision to take advantage of those native services and features. Commercial grade performance is always a must for any data center. For us, using cloud allowed us to take advantage of best in class in the industry for our IaaS and PaaS services in this case. Next slide. While having completed so many migrations has derived incredible gains for the company, it was not a path free of adversity. We've had some pitfalls along the way, and we'd certainly like to share those to help others avoid. You may recall Oracle as an enterprise had hundreds of applications that we've developed over many years. As we started working the migration of these workloads, we faced several challenges. In the first case, most of our applications were developed many years ago. They have very complex integrations across various regions, applications, and protocols. Most of these integrations remained undocumented, and they required us to spend a lot of time researching and testing to ensure that we understood very clearly what those integrations were and were to be as we shifted. Complex integrations also meant that the impact was widespread and certainly affected multiple business units. So it was critical for us to adjust our schedules, minimizing business impact, which required very careful planning and a lot of oversight over execution. Security is always top of mind. So as we've moved to cloud, we were required to create ingress, egress rules, and security lists for all of the integrations across the stack, from really layer 3 to layer 7. Building and implementing standards was the key for us to enforce this at time of deployment, at time of design. Another concern area for us is really the pace. Cloud platforms and cloud features are deployed at a very rapid scale. So as we moved fast on our migrations, we needed to decide, do we take advantage of newly deployed features that may not have the maturity, or do we build in-house tools? And could we do that in a way that was flexible enough that we could decouple from those and take advantage of adopting native services at a later date? While we also were moving to the cloud, we also had to consider that sweet spot of how fast you migrate versus operating in this long-term dual environment. So as you're shifting, there's certainly an iterative process. We set standard warranty periods as an example, and we set decommissioning standards as a best practice so we could manage that overspend and very carefully manage the timeline. Some of the applications as well, they're running on really old stacks, things that don't necessarily easily convert to modern deployments. So and this is often due to a variety of business reasons that are out of span of control of the folks actually driving the migrations. So this was difficult for us and required us to design some custom solutions that could handle the legacy tech stack for us to be able to institute a path towards migration. Next slide, please. So based on all of these experiences, we have documented our migration ABCs, which we refer to as our strategy, our guiding principles, and our standard methodology. Next slide. So starting with strategy, as we embark, or even as you continue your company's cloud migration strategy, you should always ensure you first start with your key objectives. If speed is an important variable to you, you can move fast by simply shifting current workloads to IaaS compute infrastructure and taking advantage of PaaS and SaaS services. It doesn't have to be a big bang. You don't have to refactor the entire environment. You can definitely do some basic rehosting, but you will experience immediate gains by taking advantage, which you can use to demonstrate, those wins to your customer base and really encourage trust in the process. Once you have moved, you can take advantage of the OCI Cloud Observability Service. This is actually one of my favorite services because it can easily monitor the fleet and optimize my deployments. So if you're someone like me who likes data and you like to run your business through data, you can, this is the service for you. It helps you understand right sizing. It helps you understand flexibility and scale. And then you can tie it into further automation so you can spin up and spin down and really take advantage of the agility of cloud. You can also make huge strides towards modernizing your workloads by taking advantage of container services. In this case, we used Oracle's Kubernetes engine, OKE, but there are a number of container services out there. Next slide. So moving on to some guiding principles. So, the beauty of cloud is that it is entirely customizable to your business needs. That being said, custom versus standards is, always a dilemma. So we found it important to follow a few principles to design for an evolving state. When considering our OCI cloud service standards, we made sure to choose a cloud service that could be consumed via various options to cater to the differing business needs that we may have currently or over time. For example, with database services, we could choose a standard database as a service, or for more high performant workloads, we may want to choose XSCS. Or if we wanted to really drive towards a much less hands-on model, we could take advantage of autonomous transaction processing as an example. For storage, you've got block, object, and file as well. So all of these things and beyond cover a variety of use cases, and they can be modified at any time as your workloads change and as they grow. So very flexible for you to start off in one of these areas and shift to another. We also ensured to design for security and governance. Talked a lot about security, but we're talking enterprise apps. We're talking about apps that are available to our customers as well as driving our key business services here at the company. So we built a model where we really centralized security controls through integrated security services and standards. These are standards that are required at the time of deployment. So they're built into the model, integrated into the platform, and they involve along with the application lifecycle. So we don't have to spend a lot of time going back and retrofitting security after the fact, which takes a lot of cycles, frankly, and it risks configuration drift over time. So we built in those standards as part of the deployment. We've also took a path at avoiding business impact. So we didn't want to plan on having large outage windows as we made this shift. In fact, most of our business units could not tolerate that, long periods of downtime, particularly at critical times of the fiscal year. So we started, in small iterative pieces. So you can start with dev and test. We took advantage of availability domains so we could promote high availability wherever possible. You can also run in a hybrid model. So everything doesn't have to shift to cloud. You may have some services where you want to have them, on-prem, and some services you want to have in cloud that can tie together. All of this is possible, and it's frankly very common by design in the industry. The other thing I'd like to point out is that we took the time to create an application framework. I like to think of this as sort of what I refer to as more like a building blocks model, where we grouped our apps and services and defined based infrastructure best practices through our application layers. So when we took the time to sort of lay out these templates, we were then able to deploy them as code. And then you can store those in things like the OCI build and deploy service. You can deploy them via resource manager for your Terraform template. So a lot of flexibility there. Next slide, please. So our standard methodologies is something I like to think of as the map of our journey. I would say that probably most of us don't enjoy data center archaeology because it's just frankly a lot of operational toil, and it's cleaning out, the closet of a lot of things that maybe you didn't realize you still had. So we really, most of us, I think, prefer automation. We like to document what we have done so we can improve it for moving forward. And that's really this process that we refer to as rinse and repeat here. So, again, step one was assessing and rationalizing our portfolio. We will continue to do this. It's not a one-time exercise, but we're certainly going to be adding on new corporate services and new developer services over time. So with our system, we've really taken the time to methodically simplify our disciplines and our technologies. We've carefully considered factors such as business criticality, value of the product, relevance of the technology as an example. Is this something internet facing or customer facing? We've also blueprinted our work. So, our end state continues to be working towards immutable environments. But the journey for us is really to categorize the applications to seed that business information, the technical details and service components. And then we also use features like tagging, for example, for direct billing to internal teams. And that actually helps us a lot with driving consumption models. There's other data as well that's also fed into our enterprise inventory systems. Use metadata and well-defined process controls to improve your inventory through this migration. You will not regret that step. Tenancy design is really, we took the time to consider our tenancies as a virtual data center and the attributes required to run a data center, such as things like access management, network design, shared operating models to drive towards a DevOps practice. We built out common foundational services, which are really imperative to the model. So we took advantage of as many OCI native services for things like telemetry, logging, security, domain name resolution. We established some clear remote access standards, and we manage a lot of this, through other OCI services like Connection Manager, as an example. From an orchestration and deployment standpoint, as I mentioned, we're moving towards immutable. The goal is really environment and everything is code. So we are using a CI/CD service for applications and any infrastructure deployed in our cloud environments. And that really helps us really fully take advantage of native services, but also to manage those things where we might have more of a hybrid environment. We definitely, would further encourage that you practice infrastructure as code, particularly at your network layer, your tenancy layer, your compartment layer. You can always, deploy those things through code and do other things in other ways, but you can also use post-bootstrap install to deploy configurations after the fact or agent services. And again, this helps you repeat that deployment of the same applications many times over and really drives towards the journey of reducing that operational toil. And last but definitely not least, we've created a runbook per application that really encompasses the 6 points above. And this really assists us with that execution and rinse and repeat. And it's also, helped us drive an executive dashboard, which has real-time status of our migration activities. And it also includes things like key risks and any sort of bottlenecks or, hurdles that we need to overcome. Next slide, please. So before I hand over to Paul, I wanted to provide you with a quick view of our reference architecture for your Oracle IT's tenancy. So while OCI offers regions all over the globe, we started with our first tenancy in Phoenix. And as you can see here in this diagram, we really connected the private side of our tenancy via a VPN connection and leveraged a fast connect direct connection. And our internet traffic is then managed through the gateway. So we were able to segment the way that traffic was coming into our tenancy, and we were able to then, connect outbound and inbound from the internet, but also connect back into our internal corporate network through a protected connection, which is really important for us because, again, this is an iterative process, and you're going to have connections that are really probably not just to, one single cloud environment, but likely to multiple different services. We do have region redundancy across Phoenix and Ashburn for some of our services, which we've documented here in the diagram, but we also utilize availability domains, multiple availability domains for regions redundancy for other services. So again, you can do what's best practice for your business. We further divided our environment up into several compartments, and this was really for us to facilitate the grouping of resources and limiting the span of control, and also blast radius, very important for us. So the segmentation and policy control made it really effective for us to be able to define the right permissions to respective users via identity federation through something like a single sign-on or an identity cloud service. We also segmented the network compartment, which you may notice here. In this particular case, in our case, we wanted to separate the duties for network SREs, as an example, versus our service teams. So we could restrict management of network resources versus things like compute resources or storage resources. So again, this limits your blast radius. It's a required security control for us, but this is quite flexible. So, if you wanted more segmentation, you could do that. If you wanted less, you could do that too. When I spoke earlier of common foundational services, we also had a compartment here where we implemented our monitoring services like Enterprise Manager, our YUM services, DNS services. We had another compartment for our standalone security services at the time. And then we had a third compartment actually for our DevOps services. So this is like our artifact and deployment, CI/CD pipeline services. But the benefit of cloud really here and the point is that as more and more of these services are available as part of the platform, or if there's services that you may already have deployed in other areas, you could integrate that quite easily. So we could spin up standalone services and take advantage of native services or integrated services, or spin up more if we wanted to. So by having this sort of segmentation, that was very easy for us to be able to modify the model over time. And then the remaining compartments are dedicated to our line of business groups. So our model uses a compartment per organization, which really enables us to have flexibility with the service owners to drive their operations models. But it also allows us, because of the communications with the other compartments, and even potential peering across other tenancies, it allows our customers to take advantage of our common pipeline services. And it allows us to take advantage of common secure networks and that security standard built in at the base of the model. So, the benefits of this model are really a simplified user access management, a group services that really can be applied broadly or specifically, and they're streamlined for your cost model. So you don't have to, deploy many of the same types of services. That really helps you manage software licensing costs and consumption costs of the platform itself. So that being said, it's now time for me to hand you over to Paul, and he has some excellent content for you regarding our customer journeys.
Thank you, Christine. I think I speak for everyone when I say that you just did an awesome job explaining all the great work that you and your team and Oracle has done to be able to migrate and move us forward. As we transition, I'd love to just take a quick minute here to bring up one of my favorite quotes from Albert Einstein. If I had an hour to solve a problem and my life depended upon the solution, I would spend the first 55 minutes determining the proper question to ask. Once you know that question, you can solve that problem in less than 5 minutes. And that's so fitting as we talk around our migration to the cloud and what it means for us to be able to move forward. Because once we understand the problem and we understand the right questions to ask, we can go really fast. Just as you saw from Christine and what we're doing here at OCI and Oracle, we can go extremely fast at this point because we understand what we're moving to our cloud services and why we're doing it at the end of the day. So if we can transition to the next slide. So I'd love to walk everybody through one of our journeys that we took and use a reference example on how we approached our migration, how we moved to OCI, and then the significant learnings that we had there. So the example that I'm going to give is Oracle.com, which any of you all can go to Oracle.com right now, see the extent of the site, many different languages, many different options out there, URLs, data. When you look at Oracle.com all up, it's in 115 country sites. It's got 201 locales, 350,000 URLs, 500,000 assets, and roughly 500 million views a month. So significant scale, significant complexity, and just overall a very critical service for us all up for Oracle. Now, as we look at this, this ties a lot to what Christine was talking about of how we move forward. You can look at one of the first things that we did is partner with your business directly. You're going to see that the criticality of partnering with the business, having that consistent engagement and working together as you move into the cloud is extremely important. So that's one of the first things that you want to do up front. Partner with the business. Make sure that you have your business stakeholders and your customers are aware of why you're moving to the cloud and what those impacts are going to be like. Second, you need to get a good understanding of your applications and the services that you're running, right? So we started with building an application rationalization process where we look at all of the applications and all of the services, and we start to put them down, create a catalog, understand where they are at with their roadmap. Is this a mature service or application? Is this end of life? Is this new and we're standing up? If so, is that a prime candidate to go build in a native cloud solution? Having that view on paper allows you to now have those conversations with the business of how you want to target your migration and where you want to focus, right? That catalog will then allow you to move into your deep analysis, right? This is where you now go deep and you understand dependencies between your ecosystem with your apps and your services. You understand dependencies, not just in integration, but how data flows among them. Understanding those dependencies allows you to build that plan and that migration strategy as you're moving into OCI and as you're moving into the cloud products that you badly want. This will require heavy lifting and a lot of work to understand those dependencies, but it will pay off significantly later, right? Just as we talked about from Albert Einstein's quote, doing the necessary work upfront will make your migration, your transition, and your modernization work a lot easier in the end. Now, after you've reviewed all of this and you understand your dependencies, understand how the data flows, and understand where you need to prioritize and what will move and what does not, then you can start your migration planning. This is where you need to sit down with your business, sit down with your customers, and ensure that you have a cohesive and consistent migration schedule with global commitments for your team. Now that you understand your dependencies, now you understand what the series of migration work needs to happen, and you can now start to plan those out for your organization. And this is exactly what we did for Oracle.com, for example. We also identified a staggered rollout plan to ensure that we had a zero downtime and minimal impact to our customers. That may or may not be possible for you, depending upon how you have architected your service, but this is how we were able to move into OCI without having a significant impact to our customers, which of course is the best possible scenario, because less customer impact means more opportunity for your customers to use your services, more opportunity for revenue and sales, you name it. Very important that you work out the best possible path forward with your business stakeholders and your customers. Back to that consistent engagement that needs to continue as we move forward. And then Christine really touched on this earlier as well, is building these reusable frameworks. The first couple of applications, the first couple of services are going to take a lot of work, and they're going to be difficult because you're going to be learning how this goes. You're going to be building the model of what good looks like and how we migrate. Use that to build your framework, right? Use that, your lessons learned, so that as you get to your more complex migrations, as you start to now add more throughput into the migration strategy that you have, you understand what's going on. Everyone starts slow as they're moving into the cloud, and that's a standard model. You can't move everything at once, right? So prioritize and learn from those priorities as you start to take them forward. So for example, as we went through this, we had a key takeaway from Oracle University as we migrated it. It really reinforced that we needed to have rollback planning in a playbook, because we ran into issues as we went into our production migration. And that production migration, we did not have a good coherent rollback strategy at the time, so we had to push forward and push through that pain. Learning coming out of that, for every migration going forward, we better have a rollback plan and a rollback strategy, which we then built immediately after that. But it's super important. Use these lessons learned for your early wins and early opportunities, so that you can build that mechanism and put it in place so that you can migrate faster, more efficiently, and less impact to your customers. And then, of course, business continuity is extremely important. We talked a lot around minimal impact and downtime, which is super valuable for your customers. And you need to have a heavy focus on this. Things we learned, for example, are validation with our on-premise data storage that hasn't migrated yet, as we're going through the model of migrating into Oracle Cloud. And then supportability once we have migrated into OCI, and ensuring that we have the right team in place that's trained and understands the new technology and the new way that you actually manage these environments and these ecosystems. It's very important to ensure that you've got that very clear handoff once that migration is done. But all in all, focus here, consistent engagement with your business stakeholders, your partners, and your customers, because you have to be on the same page. And spend the time up front to have the thoughtful conversations around why you're moving to the cloud. What is of value to you? And focus on the right priorities for your applications and services to be able to take them forward. Okay, next slide. So we talk a little bit around what is next. Now that you've migrated into OCI, and now that you've migrated a lot of your workloads off of the on-premise services, where do you focus next? And there's a couple of big ones here that we really want to hit on. One of them being site reliability engineering, or SRE function. Launching an SRE function and drive across your organization can pay off significantly. What we find is a lot of our on-premise solutions may not be modernized, right? And a lot of these solutions, as we move them into the cloud, we bring a lot of those sins of the past forward into our cloud services. So standing up an SRE function will enable a team to be able to go in and focus on building automation, enabling consistent telemetry being emitted from your applications and services, expanding the monitoring capability, creating dashboards, for example, that have clear SLAs that can be published, and then create proactive alerting. So that incidences or issues, you catch them ahead of time and you're alerting the engineering and development team before or after the fact, and the user's feeling that impact. SRE can essentially help you automate your way out of operational support and technical debt that you have. And it is a huge focus that we have now that we've done our migration into OCI, and it is already paying off huge dividends. A lot of that automation has already reduced our operational debt by 40%. in many of these apps and services that we've migrated over. And it is now enabling our developers to spend more time focusing on features, functions, and modernization of other applications and services versus doing the standard tasks that they were doing previously when it was on-prem, things like patching, for example, or reboots. So huge focus on SRE. Another is now that you've come into OCI and you've brought forward your on-premise applications, now is a great time to start to look at your workloads and decide, what do you want to start to re-architect now to take advantage of native cloud services, such as Oracle Container Engine for Kubernetes or Oracle functions that are out there. Now that you've done the heavy lift and got out of the data center, now's the time to figure out which applications, services, processes are important to you, to where you want to invest your time and your capacity and your resources to now modernize and re-architect. Using native cloud services will allow you to scale and provide reliability that you just didn't have previously, and allows you to focus again on getting rid of those sins of the past of your legacy services that are out there. So that's next as well. And then new insights start to come as you move now into OCI and modern world, right? Now you have tooling that enables real-time view of cost. You get oversight into saving opportunities. You now have an opportunity to guide your process through improvements and future roadmaps. Your operational debt and overhead starts to fall away. And you can now really focus on what's important for your customers and put your capacity there versus managing data centers versus managing operational tasks in an on-prem environment. All of that starts to move away as you modernize, move to the cloud, move to OCI, and then re-architect your solutions. And then application health. You know, we touched a lot of this on the SRE function. It becomes a consistent focus for the team. The teams can resize and snooze environments to drive efficiency very easily. In an on-prem world, that doesn't necessarily work. But as you're now in cloud, you have the opportunity to control your destiny. You can now create monitoring that is going to tell you for your utilization of your infrastructure, and now start to right-size it automatically if you want to be able to save money or to be able to spin down and reduce workloads for applications and services that you have. Or you can go the other way. And if you need to very quickly spin up services because you have a release or a monthly close process or something else significant going on for you, your business, or your company, you can now dynamically do this without a lot of work, you know, and spending, you know, tons of time and tons of money trying to put new hardware in a data center. So it gives you application health capability and the ability to grow and scale that you didn't have before. Super helpful. So let's hit the next slide. So talk a little bit about the summary, and I've seen some of the questions coming in already in the Q&A. At this point, we have successfully migrated over 300 production applications over the past 2 years. And if you remember, we talked a lot around the application rationalization. We've retired 200 applications and consolidated about 150 legacy systems. And that's all through the hard work of the teams and understanding what good looks like and bringing us forward. And then we've downsized from 23 data centers to 6, and we have continued plans to keep moving that forward and getting down to 0. Our goals have been very aggressive. We've moved very quickly. A couple questions in chat already coming through around, you know, what's the pace of change, in which it's dependent upon the capability of the organization. Spending that time up front to understand what good looks like, starting to get those best practices and lessons learned in place so that you can start to scale and have mechanisms in place to be able to support your teams as they move forward. Having that very clear customer and business engagement, it goes very quick and you can move very fast as well. There's lots of great opportunity out there, and there's been lots of great work that we've done and lots that we'd love to share with you as we keep working together in a partnership moving forward with OCI. So let's hit the next slide. So kind of key takeaways that we have here. I can't say it enough. It's probably the most important thing that we have here. Early and ongoing business engagement is critical to success. I tell all my teams today, you know, technology is never the blocker. We have unlimited capability in what we can do with OCI and technology. The blocker turns into not having a strategy in place, not working with your business and engaging them early enough, not having your customers on board with the changes that you want to go through. We have the technical capability. Work with your customers, work with your business, and ensure they're engaged so that everybody's on the same page before you start your migration journey. There are significant near-cost benefits that exist with this. As you get rid of your on-premise environments, as you start to spin down data center and have a footprint reduction, as you can now spin up and spin down dynamically in OCI and our cloud services, this provides a significant near-term cost benefit. And then once you're in OCI, as you start to re-architect in native services, it just gives you more capability to be able to have cost savings and benefits while continuing to scale, while continuing to be resilient and secure. And then data management strategies. It's super important that you ensure that we have a data management strategy in place and that you have your post-migration support in place after you move forward. Many times, and we had multiple lessons learned on here of not ensuring that we understood how our data was managed, not ensuring that as we migrated into OCI, that we had a very clear handoff for support and ongoing work. Make sure that you focus on this. It's a big takeaway and a huge learning that we had. And then every customer and their application is unique. So you need to be empathetic to the needs of your business and your customers. As I've mentioned earlier, right? Technology is rarely the blocker, but you've got to be on the same page with your business. And you've got to make sure that your IT, your engineering, your development team are all working together as one to be able to move forward, because your needs may be very different than our needs, which may be very different than somebody else's needs. So make sure that you understand what good looks like. Make sure that you build a very clear, consistent strategy and a plan, and then make sure that everybody that you're working with, your stakeholders, your partners, and your customers are on board. So next slide.
All right, thanks everybody, and thanks Paul. I appreciate all the background you gave on the customer engagements. I think that's a really key factor to these migrations. We're going to move into our Q&A portion of the program now. I've been seeing several questions coming in through the Q&A thus far, though we are looking to obviously get more additional questions live from you now that you've seen the entire presentation. But we have a handful kind of teed up, so please reach through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. You can ask some questions there, and we've got a few of these kind of ready to go. So Christine, I'm going to pass the first question over to you. There's a question around your tenancy design and whether you moved all your applications into a single tenancy.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ryan. Excellent question. Almost, I would say, is the answer to that question. The only thing that I would distinguish that we had to do slightly differently was in reference to some of our government environments that just had very different security postures and access requirements. And so for those, it just made more sense to segment off separately. And also in the case, if you have any sort of litigation or retention hold items that you really need to, sort of handle separately, that's also another area that I would just say to consider. But beyond that, yep, our model absolutely enables us to have all of our applications in a common tenancy, just segmented by compartments.
Okay, thanks, Christine. Paul, I'm going to move a question over to you. Top 3 challenges. What were the big 3 that you caught from your migration strategy that were the real challenges for the team?
Yeah, there's a couple, and I even touched on them as we kind of went through the presentation. The first one, back to the reference of technology is never the blocker or the inhibitor. It's working with your business and your customers. So ensuring that we have a consistent migration strategy with our business that everybody is aligned to is extremely important and something that we have to invest in together. It's the people component of building that strategy and making sure that we're all together as we go forward. So that's the first one. The second one is lots of time as we look at cloud and as we look at migration, there's a huge lift and shift component of it, which is absolutely the right thing to do to be able to get out of the data center. But in a lift and shift, you bring forward sins of the past on how you have designed the applications that you have, the large number of one-offs that you have for independent services that may be out there, or maybe even having multiple applications or services to do the exact same thing, right? So back to the app rationalization that we talked through, it is a great opportunity for you to understand what good looks like. What do we want to invest in and bring forward? What do we want to potentially now re-architect and move into native OCI services as we go forward? That's the second part. And then the third part is just ensuring that you have your team in place, that you've got individuals trained and ready to go in cloud services and cloud service frameworks, and that you're investing in your people to ensure that they are ready for the migration and then ready for the support after the migration for the environments. Those are the big three kind of key takeaways there that I think are important and challenges that we run into as we start a migration into OCI and into cloud services.
Okay, thanks, Paul. We actually have a kind of a combination question that came in right after each other. They're two separate segments of this question, so I'm going to kind of break it up between both of our panelists here. Christine, what kind of percentage cost savings did you see? I know a lot of your analysis went around reduction of on-prem when you moved into OCI and optimizing that. Do you have a rough estimate of how much we saved overall there?
Yeah, absolutely, Ryan. In fact, I have a two-part answer for that. So I would say, if I just were to look at things like, facilities costs and systems costs versus our, recurring spend with the cloud, it's like a 75% reduction of our costs. But maybe equally as important, and it's certainly important to us, is that we've also seen a very dramatic, like 80% plus reduction in major incidents and failures across the environments, largely because we were running on some pretty old stuff. And so because of that, I have a lot more time to redeploy my resources, my really highly talented resources onto other great development programs and other great projects, instead of having folks swapping out hard drives and things that are just frankly not that exciting. So I think the benefit to morale and the benefit for us to really embrace cloud more holistically is also another huge resource saving for the company.
Okay, thanks, Christine. That's a really good point. I mean, I know we focus a lot on cost reduction, but getting rid of those older environments, I think, is a really key piece for companies to really think about. Obviously we want to modernize, we want some greater stability, and that's a big win. Obviously moving to more native, cloud native technologies and designs. So that's an excellent piece. Going along with that same kind of follow-on question, Paul, I'm going to lean to you on this one. From a performance standpoint, what kind of things have you seen on your side with regard to application and enterprise performance?
Yeah, I'll actually add on to the question. When we look at performance, we see improvements across the board. These improvements can be 15% roughly for our corporate websites, roughly about 20% improvement in Apex based upon our rapid development of the application services. But the benefit also comes with the ability to optimize our environment, to be able to spin up and spin down like you couldn't do previously when you were on-prem, and then the ability to scale, right? As we look at our critical tier 0 services, right? As we now add more workloads, as we add more demand onto them, we're not in a model anymore to where we have to wait 3-6 months to be able to extend infrastructure for that environment. We can very quickly go in and add the scale that we need across the infrastructure to be able to ramp to the demand that we need. So yes, we get performance improvements, anywhere between 15-20% that we're seeing right now as we migrate into OCI. But we also now have just this huge capability that we didn't have previously on being able to be scalable, resilient, and secure. So there's lots of great opportunities that are out there.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Christine, I'm going to give you one a little bit off center relation to our Oracle story necessarily. There's a question from the audience on migration from, say, a primarily Microsoft data center, or from a very Microsoft-centric cloud design. Is that something that you could give any advice on, or how we could maybe look at like a hybrid model or something like that maybe we can give some advice to?
Yeah, I mean, I would say today, Ryan, we definitely have, some standard productivity applications that we use, that run with Microsoft, but we've also moved a large segmentation of our Microsoft internal deployments did move over to OCI. So we, have hundreds of services that, or servers, I should say, that, we moved over onto OCI, so we can run Microsoft operating systems on top of our OCI platforms. As far as migration standards, I know there's all kinds of great best practice that's been published on our oracle.com site. So as Paul mentioned earlier, oracle.com has a wealth of information specifically in this area, but there's definitely that flexibility and capability there within the platform itself to be able to move Microsoft workloads directly onto OCI.
Great scene. I appreciate that. We're still getting a handful of other questions in the chat that we're looking to tee up here. Are there any other Q&A questions I can get from the audience while we kind of get ready to kind of wrap up? Give it a few more seconds to get a few more questions in. Okay, it looks like we're going to answer a handful more just live via the chat. We'll get back to either a little more specific to the general questions that are being asked. Christine or Paul, do you have any other final notes from your side for wrap up today?
Yeah, I'll kick off first. As we look at all of the great work that Christine and team have done, for example, and as we partnered across our organization, it is an example of how we can work together to be able to essentially move mountains, getting out of a data center, creating that opportunity for your business and your customers, working closely to define a strategy that works for you and where you need to go, and just giving you that capability that you just don't have today, right? Being very straightforward. If you're in an on-premise environment, it is very difficult to continue to manage that infrastructure and to continue to scale and to grow. Moving into cloud services such as OCI and moving into native OCI services just unlocks so much potential for you. And we have seen so much value and benefit here. And so many of the OCI services that we offer provide such a great opportunity for you to really modernize and build for the future for your customers and for your business. So I'm super excited with what's happened. I'm super excited with where we're going. Technology is awesome. OCI has been awesome. And I think we've got a lot of capability that we can offer for you.
Yeah, and thank you, Paul. And I would just add on to that, as I started out with, we've moved enterprise applications of all shapes, sizes, but we've also moved some key developer services. So we've moved source code repos, and we've provided environments, cloud environments for our development community to really be able to, test and develop products in ways that they have not had access to in the past. And, all of this has been hugely beneficial for the company. So, the other point I would make is that it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be a big bang. So, moving to cloud can be an iterative process. And, you can certainly operate in a hybrid environment for some time. You can certainly choose to do just, key parts of your services over in a cloud environment. Take the time to do that research in advance, understand, what you've got, in your portfolio, but don't be intimidated, because there's all kinds of flexibility in the services out there. And then chances are very high that there's other folks in the industry who have done similar things. And, here at Oracle, we're happy to share any of our experiences. And we really appreciate you joining our call today.
Thank you, Christine. I really appreciate that. We are running out of time, so I'm going to kind of wrap up the webinar here. I do see several questions in the Q&A that kind of popped in the last few minutes. We're probably not going to have time to speak to those live, but I do encourage everybody here to reach out to the email address you see on the screen, the Oracle at Oracle program email address that's listed in the center here. We are going to post a replay of this webinar as well, along with copies of the slides. And before we go, we're actually going to kick off a quick poll. Obviously, we'd like to make sure that everyone here enjoyed the webinar, but I'd like to get your feedback and make sure that we're lining these Oracle and Oracle programs to kind of match the interests of the people that are going to be watching it. So if you love today's program, we'd love to see a 10, of course, but obviously, please give us your honest feedback about how you felt about the webinar. And again, expect in the next 48 hours or so, we're going to do these replays, and PDF presentations will be posted, and we'll be able to do that. I'd like to thank all of you for joining again, and I hope to see you again at another Oracle and Oracle program. And please give your feedback as well via that link if there's any topics that you would love us to hit that you don't have generally available to.